guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. So today's video, as you can tell by the title, is going to be a little bit different. This is a different route than I usually take on my channel or than I've shared before, but I'm excited to share this story with you, and today's video is all about my car accident. So I guess you could kind of call it like a story time, because I'm going to be sharing with you about my car accident and how it happened, what my injuries were, how I recovered from it. If you guys are new to my channel, then you may not know, but if you've been around for a little while, then you've probably heard me reference this car accident I was in and how it kind of changed my life and it changed my perspective on life, and it was a big thing. I shared on my Instagram stories a little while ago some pictures from it. I think it shows the severity of it, and so I'm like nervous talking about this, I don't know why, but I asked you guys on there if you would be interested in hearing the story, and the majority of you said yes, so here I am. I am like nervous talking about this. I've never talked about my accident in a public way like this. Obviously my close friends and family know about it and it's not a secret, but I've never like talked about it a whole lot, and it definitely is a huge part of who I am. It has completely changed the course of my life. It's completely changed the way I view life. It's completely changed the events thereafter that led to who I am today. And so it's a really important story to me because it does make me who I am today, although it doesn't define me, and that's part of what I want to share with you guys today. I have notes in my phone because it was a few years ago, and like I said, I've never talked about it in a setting like this, so I anticipate today feeling a little bit like a therapy session for me, but I don't want to get off track and I don't want to lose my main point, so I do have notes in my phone to keep me on track. And then I also pulled out my folder with like all my paperwork from back then just to jog my memory as well. I'll also be adding in photos and videos from my recovery and kind of talking through that, so that it's really going to bring you guys along on the experience with me too. Okay, so my accident happened on August 23rd, 2015. It happened on the 405 South at 5 o'clock in the morning, so it was a freeway accident, high speed. To give you guys like a kind of an overview of it, just to see if you even want to keep watching the rest of this video or let you know why it's been such a pertinent piece of my life, is because it was a high-speed accident. It was not my fault. I was hit by somebody else, and I ended up having a lot of injuries, and I ended up being in the hospital for a week, and then it took me several weeks to be able to walk again, and it took me a lot longer than that to emotionally recover from it too. So it was 5 o'clock in the morning. It was pitch black. Keturah, who you guys have seen here on this channel, if you don't know, or if you're new here, she's my sister-in-law and my best friend. She was here visiting for a girls' weekend. And so she had been here for a girls' weekend for several days. That evening, we like went out for drinks with Jordan. He took us out to this restaurant. We got drinks. It was great. We had an evening out. We had been shopping earlier in the day, like total normal weekend. The next morning, she flew out super early, and so I went at 5 o'clock or so to take her to the airport. At the time, we were living in the Laguna Beach, Aliso Viejo area, which if you're not familiar with Orange County, it is in Orange County, a little more south, and she was flying out of Long Beach Airport, so I had to drive her from South Orange County up to Long Beach. Dropped her off for her flight, we said our goodbyes, and I headed home at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, and that's why I was driving south on the freeway when it was pitch black at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. What happened was that the way I was hit was that there was another driver who he drove an older Civic at the time. I was actually also in a Civic, but it just was a newer one. But he was in a Honda Civic and I was driving here. There were two cars in front of me in different lanes, and then this driver started coming up next to me, and he was driving fine. He was driving normally. Like, the accident honestly came kind of, I knew it was coming when it actually happened, which I'll talk about in a second, but in terms of his driving, he wasn't like openly recklessly driving or anything. It just seemed like a very quiet night. So in California, there's a lot of traffic out here. You've probably heard about how there's so much traffic in California, even if you're not from here. So to have only 3 or 4 cars on the road at once, it's not very crowded. It was basically like having nobody on the road. And so the fact that my accident happened and was so bad with hardly anybody driving is pretty I don't know, rare. So anyways, he was coming up next to me, and I could see him kind of like come up next to me or whatever. He was next to me for a second, and then he passed me, and he got in front of me, and I could see him swerving like a little bit. He seemed like he wasn't super focused, but honestly, it sounds awful, but that's how a lot of people out in California drive. And so I just, at the time, my mind was like, oh, this guy, you know, like, oh, this doesn't, like, oh, he's not so focused. Now I'm much more conscious of like separating myself from drivers like that, obviously. But back then, I thought he was just like kind of another not super focused driver. He wasn't swerving a lot though, but he just, you could kind of see him like weaving a little bit in his own lane. To be honest, I don't remember the specifics of how he hit other cars around me, but apparently what I learned was that he swerved, hit the car next to him, and then he swerved off of that car and like spun into me and hit me. And when he hit me, my car spun out and it hit the wall on the freeway head on. So I was going like 65 miles an hour at the time. I do remember him spinning out towards me. I don't remember hitting the wall. I have no recollection, and thank God, I'm like so thankful. I have no recollection of hitting the wall or of the immediate events thereafter that I'll talk about, but I do remember him about to hit me. I remember seeing, like I mentioned, I remember seeing his car kind of like swerve a little bit like this, and then I remember seeing his car actually spinning out on the freeway towards my car. And I remember thinking, like, it was happening so fast, there was no way I could get out of that line. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is gonna happen. This is really gonna affect me. Oh my God, he's gonna hit me. And I braced the wheel with both hands, and I was like, okay, this is gonna happen. And then it all went black, and I don't have any recollection after that. That was the last thing I remember, is bracing myself for the impact, but I don't remember his car actually hitting me or me hitting the wall. The next thing I remember is being rushed on a hospital stretcher, very much like what you see in the movies. I couldn't open my eyes, or I couldn't be present in that moment, but I remember having like a bright white light flash. Like all I could see was like a bright white light. And I remember trying to sit up or trying to move my neck, and I heard voices around me on both sides, and they were men, and they were like, no, Olivia, don't do that. We got you. We're rushing you in. We're going to get you help. Don't move your neck. Whatever you do, don't move your neck. Like, you're stable. Just stay still. We're getting you help. And they just kept repeating that. And it was all white. And it was like a split second of it, but that's all I remember. And then the next thing I knew, I was waking up in my hospital room. So what had happened in that span was that this driver, he hit me. When he spun out, he hit my car. I spun out and I hit the wall. And my car was totaled immediately. So was his, because I think he ended up hitting the wall as well, although his injuries were extremely minor, especially compared to mine. But both our cars were totaled. My car was totaled immediately. And the other two drivers who were there, they were written up in the accident report, but neither car was actually impacted. The drivers were fine. Nobody else was hurt really, except for me in this situation. They, I think, called 911. Some other witnesses called 911. And what happened was a couple Marines actually who were headed, I'm assuming, towards Camp Pendleton. They had seen it happen, and so they pulled over, and they're angels. I don't know who they are, but they pulled over, and you'll probably see me cry in this movie, feels like a movie. You'll probably see me cry a little bit in this video too, but they pulled over and they got me out of the car and they stabilized my neck. They actually had like equipment with them to do so, and so they pulled me out. They laid me on the ground, they put a brace on my neck, stabilized me, called 911, and then they called Jordan from my phone as well. So they went into my medical ID, which funny enough, I didn't even know, until we had Christian, our son, I didn't know how they even got Jordan's phone number, how they knew he was my husband. And then my toddler loves to pull up my medical ID and call my husband that way through the emergency contact on my phone, and I completely forgot I had even set that. So pro tip, make sure your emergency contact is up to date in your phone, because these Marines went in there and they called Jordan and they were like, and he said he answered the phone. This was 5:30 in the morning. He knew I was driving back from Long Beach. And he was like, hey babe, how's it going? Like, he thought I was just calling him on my drive back. But it actually was this voice of this man that he didn't know. And the man told him, your wife's been in a car accident. We called for help. Like, we're gonna get her help, but I just wanted you to know Olivia's been in an accident. And then the police showed up and they couldn't give Jordan more information over the phone, and it was disconnected. So Jordan ended up calling 911 to figure out where my ambulance was routed, and they wouldn't tell him at all my condition. They wouldn't tell him what happened. They couldn't tell him what happened with the accident. They wouldn't give him private information, even though he's my husband. All they did was tell him where my ambulance was going. And so by the time I had woken up at the hospital, he was actually there waiting for me already. He also called Katura, my sister, and obviously let her know. She canceled her flight. She took an Uber or a taxi to the hospital. And so when I woke up, they both were there waiting for me. So I remember waking up at the hospital, and I think I had been unconscious probably for a few hours. I have photos from that moment, or from, like, you know, my first initial hour or so in the hospital conscious, and they were from 3 p.m. The accident happened at 5:30, so I guess it was probably like 10 hours or so that I was unconscious in the hospital. And during that time they did MRIs and CAT scans, and they like obviously checked out what injuries I had. So by the time I woke up in the hospital, everybody was very well versed in what injuries I had and what happened, and they could fill me in on the process. Like I said, Jordan and Katura were there, so when I woke up, I asked for my husband, and they weren't in the room with me. I woke up in the room by myself, and I asked for my husband, and they let him and her in. And I just remember they came like rushing in and rushing to my side. And funny enough, my next thought was, for some reason, I thought I was pregnant, and I wasn't at the time. We weren't even close to having kids, but in that state of like delirium, that's what I thought was going on. So I asked the nurses if the baby was okay, and I was like, is the baby okay? Is the baby gonna be okay? And they were like, honey, you're not pregnant, like there's no baby, you're fine. And I was like, can I have babies still? Like, am I still gonna be able to have babies? And obviously I was, but it just, this is a lot harder to talk about than I thought it would be. Obviously I was still able to have children, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, for some reason it's just as strange. That was like my first initial thought, was like, where's my husband? And then, is the baby okay / can I still have babies? In terms of what my injuries were, when I hit the wall, I actually hit it, I was impacted on the side, so my car hit head on. The collision like impacted my driver's side, and so it hit my body like this. And so my biggest injury was that it broke my pelvis. It also fractured my hip. It also broke my nose. It fractured my cheekbones. I had orbital fractures. I had a severe concussion. And like I mentioned, it did take several weeks to be able to walk again because of that pelvis and hip break. I was extremely lucky. I didn't need pins or a cast or any kind in my pelvis. You guys know we're huge fans of The Office, so whenever I picture a pelvis break, I picture Meredith Palmer in her cast, and that's not what I needed. It actually was very rare that I didn't need one, but they said because of the placement of the actual breakage in the bones, I didn't need any pins or any cast. I just couldn't walk, and I was instructed not to anyways. But I also didn't need any like major reconstructive surgery on my face. Thank God, because of where the breakages happened in my face. I did end up getting nose surgery right afterwards, because my nose, while it was broken, it actually, from the impact being so strong on this side, it actually had curved my nose. And I have pictures from that time where you can see my nose is like, it's actually rounded on my face, and it looks like a curve. And so I did get my nose fixed, I guess. All they did was like go in and straighten it out. But that was part of like the work I needed afterwards. So other than the nose surgery, I didn't need anything with the cheeks or the orbital fractures. Like, I could still see fine. I didn't have any, additional surgeries needed beyond that. I do have a couple small scars on my nose, like up here from just the accident, but I got extremely lucky with my injuries. Although there were a lot of them, I don't have any long-term damage. I have sensitivity to light because the concussion was so bad, but like still there are many days when, you know, I don't know, I need sunglasses when other people don't, or if it's too bright it hurts my face, things like that, but that's very minor in my opinion. And I have like some soreness on my pelvis, especially when pregnant. It's a little more sensitive than maybe if I wouldn't have had the breakage. In terms of having kids, we actually didn't know until I gave birth if I'd be able to that way. When I was pregnant with Christian, my doctor had kind of prepped me that like because of my pelvis breakage, we would need to see, or my previous pelvic break, we would need to see if the plates opened up for me to give birth. But he had kind of prepped me that because of that break, I might need a C-section my first time around, and I didn't. My body just kind of did what it needed to do. I had no problems getting pregnant, I had no problems giving birth, and I'm not anticipating any problems for this one either. So I got extremely, extremely lucky. Although they look brutal, they were brutal. Long term, I can walk around every day now and not be reminded of it, which is pretty incredible. In terms of my recovery, I was in the hospital for a week. During that week, they worked with me on rehabilitating my body. I worked with a physical therapist throughout that week. First, it was just sitting up, because at first I couldn't even sit up. And so they would put this bar in front of me and I held onto the bar and I'd like have to pull myself up on it a little bit at a time. And that felt like a huge victory to even be able to do that and even be able to pull myself up. Once I could do that easily, they started helping me out of bed and they would have me walk, like take tiny steps around the room. And that felt like a really big victory. And once I could do that, we started taking tiny laps around the floor or just over to the staircase just down the hall. I was walking with a walker to learn how to re-walk and like see if I could put pressure on my legs. And to be honest, it was so brutal. I hated that physical therapist. She was a lovely woman, but like it was like I dreaded when she came because I knew I had to push my body, and she had no qualms like pulling me out of that bed, pulling me up, getting me on my walker, and she would tell me like, honey, you have to push yourself if you want to get better. Like you've got to push past the uncomfortable part if you want to do this again. And I know it hurts and you have to just learn. And so she was like an angel that I resented in the moment because she actually made me work for it. And now obviously I see why she did, and she knew what she was doing and I trusted her fully. But in the moment I was like, oh my God, this is awful. So yeah, we would do laps around the floor and like that wing of the hospital. I was in the like trauma department at the hospital, and at the time I didn't know the other man that hit me. I didn't know what his injuries were. So as I remember doing walks around the floor, and as we would do those laps, I would look at the other patients there and be like, is he who hit me? Is that the guy who hit me? Like I was constantly thinking that in my head, but I didn't know. And he didn't have injuries. In fact, on the police report, the only injury that was listed for him was a bump to the forehead. And so that's all that was listed for him. I'll talk more about him in a second as well. So yeah, and then after the laps on the floor, they also would walk me over to the stairs and teach me how to go up and down stairs on my own, because we actually, in the apartment we lived in, we were on the 3rd floor with 3 flights of stairs getting up there, no elevator. So I had to get upstairs somehow physically if I wanted to get back into our home. And so they actually taught me a way to kind of crab walk backwards up the stairs, and I would hoist myself stair by stair on the floor to get back up the stairs. And then once I got to the top, I would use my walker to get to our apartment. And after that, I don't know how much longer later, but eventually after the walker, I transitioned to crutches because I only needed them on the one side that I had the hip break as well. And so Jordan could actually help me up the stairs. We had this really sweet video that I just embodies all of him being there for me throughout this process. And yeah, he just was so helpful. And so with his help, I was able to navigate and get up 3 flights of stairs like a week and a half after this traumatic accident and do it regularly. So in terms of the man that hit me, and I think this is probably why it's so strange for me to finally talk about this, and this is honestly one of the reasons why it's taken me so long to openly talk about my accident, is just for like privacy purposes, also legal purposes in the beginning, but mainly this is like a whole nother element of my recovery. But the man that hit me was never caught. He never had to assume responsibility for it. He's not a good guy. And I have no issue saying that out loud now, but at the scene of the accident, like I mentioned, his car was totaled. He gave a fake phone number, a fake address, a fake insurance policy number, complete fake information. And at the time, they were so worried about me laying in the road that, you know, obviously they don't double check those things on the spot. He had a friend come pick him up at the scene. He denied help from an ambulance or from the police, and that's in the police report that he denied any assistance. He had a friend come get him, and he was never heard from again. Our lawyers ended up putting out something for him in the newspaper to basically call him to assume responsibility for it. I don't know what the proper term is, but that was the process at the time, was putting something in the paper for him, and which that didn't do anything. We ended up finding out through the insurance company he listed that he wasn't covered by them. And apparently he had previously been covered from them in past years, but he didn't have car insurance at the time. So I'll talk about the financial implications in a little bit, but that ended up actually working in my favor. But he did lie about having car insurance. And yeah, a bump to the forehead and getting picked up by a friend, and that was it. And that was all he faced. And it blows my mind, because obviously he didn't know what happened to me. He was much more coherent at the scene than I was, so he had to have seen me laying in the road with a neck brace and unconscious and bleeding all over, and he left me there like that. And he doesn't know if I died or if I lived. And it's pretty crazy that man is still out there walking around doing God knows what, driving God knows how, when that's how he operates. It's a real shame. So we actually, when we were in the process of trying to find him, because we did get lawyers, I had $80,000 in hospital bills from my week-long stay in the hospital. And so we got lawyers to, take out a claim against him. So it's interesting, if you Google my name, you'll actually find my case against him, which went nowhere because we couldn't find him. But in the process when we were trying to find him, my dad is in newspapers, funny enough, and he actually used his software at work to look up this guy and see if we could find out where he lived or what his history was like. And I have it all written down because he has such a long driving history of offenses. He had past driving issues for having narcotics on him, for running red lights, for not having his seatbelt on, for driving with minors, young infants in the car and no car seat, for driving recklessly around a school bus. He was ordered to go to Narcotics Anonymous at one point due to his driving offenses with drugs. He lost his license at one point. And so to me, what we kind of pieced together from that is that most likely, I'm guessing he was coming back from LA the night of my accident, probably high, probably on pills or something like that, because I guess he was tested for alcohol at the scene and he didn't have, he got a breathalyzer and he didn't have alcohol in his system, but I had seen him swerving and obviously he hit me and then ran off. So I think he probably was high on pills, and not to just assume of anybody, but I think that's what makes sense in this situation. And I think he probably was coming back from a night of partying in LA, and that's why he was driving the way he was at 5 o'clock in the morning on the road. Like I said, no repercussions or anything for him at all. And although I know his name, it's a fairly common name, so if you Google it, you find so many different people. It was really impossible to track him down. So with that being said, kind of the second part of my recovery is that I had this whole mental and emotional recovery. When I woke up in the hospital, my immediate thought was, I have got to beat this. I was so motivated and so determined and so inspired to come back from this and to have this comeback story and to have all my friends and family from home you know, they all knew that this had happened. We put it on Facebook to update people because at the time we didn't know how it might shape my life. And we wanted people to know, but to know I was okay, but to know that, hey, she's been in this accident. And I got so much love and support from my friends. I actually still have screenshots that people, back then we were using Snapchat regularly, and like snaps from people and messages from people. And I was reached out to by people who like I haven't talked to in years, or people who I had had a falling out with. And like, it just, I had gotten so much support, and it was the motivation I needed in the hospital to overcome it and to be better than that. And so initially I was so focused on my physical recovery. And I was very focused on walking again. And at the time, Keturah was actually getting married 5 weeks from then. John and Keturah got married 5 weeks from my accident. And so at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get better. I have to walk in their wedding. I'm the maid of honor. I need to be able to walk down that aisle and not have a walker, and not have anything ruin her big day, and not be able to not participate. And I'm so blessed that happened. I actually recovered and was able to walk without a walker for the first time, I think 3.5 weeks after my accident. And I remember the first time I did it was Jordan and I went to Fashion Island, the mall, and we parked, and it was the slowest mall trip I've ever had. It was like the slowest mall walk ever. He helped me around the whole mall, and it was this huge victory for me. And we took pictures, and I was like, standing without my walker for the first time in a month. I mean, and 2 weeks before that, I needed my walker just to go to the bathroom. And then once I got to the bathroom, I had to sit on a chair in the shower to even bathe myself. And it was incredible. And then by the time their wedding came, I was able to walk down the aisle like nothing had happened. And I just feel so blessed to be able to do that. That being said, once that physical recovery and what was over, and once I overcame it, I had all the feelings of the accident and the resentment towards this person to deal with. And that actually didn't happen or didn't hit me until probably like a year after the accident. I remember coming up on my 1-year anniversary of the accident, and we celebrated by going ziplining, and I really wanted to do something that felt wild and that felt freeing and physically freeing, and something that scared me that I would never do before. And it was amazing. But around that time, I was also having these feelings of like, okay, it's been a year, I physically recovered, and this guy still hasn't been caught. And I have gone through this huge life change, this huge physical recovery, physical setbacks, and like, I took ownership of that the last year, and now what? And it was a really hard thing to deal with. I had to really learn how to let go of that anger, and it took me a little while, to be honest. In that year after the accident, I hit a really low depression. Like, I've talked on my channel before about how depression runs in my family. I've kind of had it on and off my whole life. And at that point, I was like, I don't know why I was saved. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm here for. And like, clearly I'm here for something, because otherwise I could have just faded in that moment. But instead I was pulled out of it, and I was pulled out stronger, and I don't know what the purpose is. And meanwhile, there's this guy walking around who could have hit 5 other people since then and impacted 5 other people like this. And I had so much anger, and everything came back to me being angry at him. And so I had to learn to just let go of it and only worry about myself. And that honestly was hard, but it's something that has stayed with me ever since then. Like, I cannot worry about other people. I cannot hold grudges. I can't hold anger or resentment towards other people, because at the end of the day, we can't control what they do. We can only control how we react to it. And I had to find that purpose for myself. I had to find that happiness for myself. And I had to realize that him getting caught would not bring me happiness. If he got caught and okay, he went to jail for a year, or he lost his license permanently, like, would that really solve my happiness in that moment? Would that really fulfill me in the way I was looking for? No, that wasn't actually the problem. The problem was that I had this resentment and this emotional feelings, these emotional side effects that I never took time to process. I just jumped into go, go, go mode and recover, 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 and beat this and overcome and triumph and strength. And I never thought about, holy crap, this is a really big emotional, mental thing for me to overcome. And I need time to sit back and process those feelings and grow from it. And so once I did that, I was able to mentally and emotionally overcome it as well. But it took me that time of self-reflection to realize, okay, what is the actual problem here? Because the problem isn't that he didn't get caught. Yes, that's not ideal, but that's not why I'm struggling right now. I'm struggling for my own reasons and my own process in this. And that was a hard lesson to learn through it, but I did. I also had to realize that I couldn't let the accident define me anymore. So I think that first year it was like, oh yeah, it kind of was all about the accident. And the accident was something that was a huge part of my story, and it still is. It's still a huge part of who I am and my story, but it's not one I need on blast all the time. It's not one I need when I'm introducing myself to people, or that I wanted to have be a main part of my channel. That's why it took me so long to talk about it, because clearly you can see I'm still affected by it. It's a hard thing that I went through, but it doesn't define me. It's a challenge I overcame, but it's not the sole thing responsible. You know, I am responsible for my life turning out the way it is. It doesn't define my life or me as a person. And so it's taken me a little while to get to a place where I can tell it this way in a story time kind of way, and not have it be, hey, I'm Olivia, I went through this big accident 4 years ago, I had to learn how to walk all over again. Like, because that's not what it's about. But it is like, hey, I'm Olivia, I've overcome some major challenges in my life. Here's what I learned from them, and here's how I grew, and this is why my life is the way it is today. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like I'm saying it doesn't define me, and then in my thought process it sounds like it does. It doesn't. It's taken me a little while to get to a place to feel comfortable and confident talking about it. So in terms of whether, you know, he never got caught from my accident, at least, and I just have to not worry about that, and I have to pray that he hasn't hurt somebody else in the way he hurt me. I mean, the thought of him driving recklessly around a school bus, or driving a baby or toddler without a car seat, and then driving the way he drove that hit me, is absolutely terrifying. And I have to just let go of the control that I can't control that. I can't control whether or not he gets caught. All I can do is pray that he's not acting that same way now, and that nobody else is hurt the way I was hurt, and just pray for him and pray for them, and, you know, try and be a better person myself because of it. So financially, if you guys are curious, I mentioned I had $80,000 in hospital bills, plus the $10,000 nose surgery afterwards. That all ended up being covered. So the way it shook out, at least for us, because he was not insured, my insurance company paid us out for uninsured motorist coverage, because I had that as part of my policy. So my insurance company paid us out, plus his company that he claimed he was using actually ended up paying some out as well, since they previously covered him. And I don't know the exact terms of that, but it was something like, because they previously covered him and he was claiming they covered him now, and he had a policy number, even though the policy was expired, they did end up paying some out. And so the combination of the two ended up covering all of my hospital bills, and I was really lucky there as well. I still obviously have some PTSD, which you can probably tell from this video. I've never gotten like therapy for it mentally or anything. It's funny, I've gotten therapy a little bit since the accident, but I always end up talking about other things. I just have a lot I need to talk about in therapy, I guess. But I think even if I went to a therapist, it took me this long to get to a place to be able to vocalize my thoughts on it. And yeah, it's just a hard thing, man. It's a hard thing to talk about, and it seems silly to me because lots of people are in car accidents, and as awful as it is, it's true. Lots of people are in car accidents, and I don't know this man, and it's not like it was a personal vendetta against me, but it still is. It's the most traumatic thing I've ever gone through, and it takes some processing every time I talk about it. Coming that close to death, period, and not knowing if you'll ever walk again, or not knowing what the outcome would look like was really scary. And it was really scary for my husband at the time. It was really scary for my husband, for Jordan as well. And so we both have this reaction. Like, even him too, when we talk about the accident, he tears up. He still cries over it, because it's an emotional, it's triggering for us. And so I probably would benefit from therapy sometime, but I think life has moved fast, and it's taken me a little while to get to a place to be able to talk openly like this about it. So I do still have PTSD from it. Not intense. It's not like I wake up screaming in the night. It's not like I'm crying like this all the time about it. But if I sit down, if I talk about it, it makes me cry. I also have like knee-jerk reactions when we're driving. If we're on the freeway and like things seem very close to me or very fast moving, more so than other people. So there are many times when Jordan's driving and I do one of those and I slam my foot down and I grab the walls, and like I think something's happening when it's not really. And at first he would almost like get annoyed with it after like 2 years I was still doing it, and he's like, hey, you gotta trust me when I'm driving. And I had to tell him like, hey, I trust you. It's a physical reaction. It's not me at all. Like, so now it'll happen and I'm like, sorry. And he's like, no, you're good. Don't say sorry. Like, I think we both have just come to understand what like the physical knee-jerk reaction is there. So I do have like kind of that PTSD on the freeway too, especially driving at night. I hate driving on the highway at night, and it's made me like limit how I drive and when I drive. But other than that, like, I'm good, you know, and I'm, like I said, I'm blessed that I can sit here, and if you didn't know this had happened, you would have no idea. If I'm not telling you, you'd have no idea. And physically, I am just as strong, if not stronger, than I was when I went to the accident. Also, I didn't mention this before, but at the time of my accident, I was working out rigorously every single day. I was in the best shape of my life, and the doctor said that was partly why I didn't need, or why I recovered so fast, because my core was so strong. It helped my pelvis kind of repair itself sooner, and it also helped me be able to walk sooner. So it might have been a longer recovery if I wasn't physically taking care of myself before it happened. So in terms of life lessons I learned, life is short, man. It is short, and it could be gone in the blink of an eye. And I used to be afraid of death, honestly. It used to be like my biggest fear, to die. And now I'm not afraid of it, because you live a life up until you do. And that's what's most important, is how you're living. And it could be taken from you in a heartbeat. So I'm not afraid of growing old and peacefully dying anymore. I'm afraid of not living, and I'm afraid of dying tomorrow and feeling like I didn't live. And so life is short, and we all could be taken at any minute, and we hear stories like that all the time today, and it's awful to think about, but it's the reality of it. So it's cliche, it sounds cliche to like live every day like it's your last, but I really try and do that, because I've seen what it feels like to think it's your last. And at the end of my life, whether that's a year from now, God forbid, or it's 40 years from now or longer, I want to be able to be proud and feel like I lived it to the fullest that entire time. It also taught me that relationships are what is most important. So this accident saved my marriage, if I'm being honest with you. Jordan and I were not in a good place when I got into my accident. We actually were on the verge of separating. We were fighting nonstop. We had a lot of issues in our marriage. And obviously, I'm not going to get into what those are, but we were not in a healthy marriage. We were not in a healthy relationship, and we took each other for granted, and we both are very aware of that. When I woke up in the hospital room and I saw him there, he was all I could think about, and he was all I cared about, and my safety was all he cared about. And when he rushed to my side there, I remember I was like, I'm so sorry. And that was the first thing I said to him. I was like, I'm so sorry, because I felt so guilty. I thought I caused the accident, and I thought I had caused this big commotion in our lives. And I didn't know it wasn't my fault, but I was like, I'm so sorry. And he was like, no. He was like, nothing else matters. Nothing matters. You are all that matters. And that's what he said back to me. Sorry, guys, but that's what he said back to me when he was at my bedside there. And I will never forget that. And it's true, like, nothing else matters. And everything material and everything stressful in our lives don't matter. What matters are the people and the relationships you have and the people you're close with and the people who care about you. And so that recovery, that moment, that accident forced us to think about what would it be to live without this person. And honestly, ever since my accident, we have been strong as nails. Is that a phrase? I don't know, but we have been so strong ever since then. We rarely fight. It all comes back to that. And anytime we do have a fight, our perspective is we're going to be together at the end of this. So let's just talk it out and get through it. And we've shared that before, but now maybe you guys know why that's our perspective. Like at the end of the day, us being together is what matters the most. And so it has helped our communication style. It has helped our priorities. It has helped us prioritize each other. It has helped us see the bigger picture in our marriage and in our life. And I don't know if I wouldn't have gotten in that accident, I don't know if we would be together. And I don't know, I wouldn't have Christian, our son, and this second baby. And it saved our marriage. It saved us as people, and it saved us together as a couple as well. Whew. That stuff's like really hard for me to admit. It also, my accident taught me to go for scary things. So I've lived through this mantra of like, if it scares you, it's worth pursuing. Like I said, life is short. You don't know when it's going to be taken from you. And so I actually started my YouTube channel 3 months after my accident, which is crazy to think about that it's been that long, but I had been wanting to do YouTube for years before I started my channel. I had been watching it for years. It was something I always envisioned doing and I dreamt of, but I just didn't see, for whatever reason, I didn't view myself as the type to do it. And now, you know, a couple years later or a few years later, and I found kind of my niche and I found my community here and I've grown and there's almost 100,000 people here supporting me, and I never would have envisioned that. I never would have put myself out there had it not been for my accident. And so that's why, honestly, one of the only regrets I have in my life is not starting this channel sooner, because who knows what it could be if I would have started it sooner. But I'm glad that at least the accident happened to push me to do it. And it's pushed me to do so many other scary things too. That's just one example. Starting my channel is just one example, but my accident has forced me to do the things that scare me and to put myself out there even when I'm second guessing it. And so far, every time it has been the right choice. It also, like, you know, my marriage, my YouTube channel, it led to a career. At the time, I was out of job. I actually had gotten fired from a job earlier that year because I was slacking, and I had kind of lost myself for a little bit before my accident. And after my accident, I needed a job, but I couldn't. At the time, I was looking for jobs and I couldn't just go to retail or some of my go-tos. Like, I physically wouldn't be able to do a retail job at that point. So I was looking for remote roles and I was looking for work from home jobs. And I ended up finding one and being able to grow with the company and get promoted and have a career from it. And that's one example of how, like, if this accident wouldn't have happened, my life as it looks now would not be the same. The following events after that accident, like, the accident had to happen for those events afterwards to happen. And it's honestly mind-blowing to me when I think about it, but it has made me such a firm believer in the fact that everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. Every little setback, every hurdle, every conversation, every person you meet, every milestone, whether it's a positive or a negative, it happens for a reason. And it has brought me so much peace, because even when I have hard things happen, even when really shitty things happen in my life, I can think, like, you know what, this happens for a reason and there's a bigger plan that it just hasn't unfolded yet, but it'll get there. And it's true. And when you think about your life now and as it looks right now, there are probably some things that had to happen for it to get to that point. And when I think backwards, you know, it all comes back to that accident. That was kind of like the turning point for me, which is why I want to clarify, like, it doesn't define me, but I do acknowledge that everything happens for a reason, and that it happened for lots of reasons. The accident happened for a lot of different reasons. So that's kind of all I have to say on it. Like I said, I have this huge stack of hospital paperwork still that I hold on to just in case I need it for anything. I don't know why I pulled it out thinking it would help me with this video. I know this video was really long. I appreciate you guys giving me this space and showing interest in me and this story, and I appreciate you kind of leaving me the space to cry and unload a little bit, but I hope there were some lessons in here for you. I hope that this story helps teach others to just embrace life, find happiness. Like, I know I seem a little emotional in this video, understandably so with the topic, but if you know me or if you know my channel, you know I'm actually a very happy person, and I've had people ask me like, how do you always find happiness and how do you stay such an upbeat person? And honestly, this is how. So this story has shown me that like life is short. Embrace every day. That's why on some of my videos from last year, you'll see a little intro that says finding joy in every day, because I want to find joy in every single day. Even the messes, even the chaos, even the day-to-day, and even the frustrating days, they have joy and they have purpose, and they're all part of this bigger reason for everything happening. So if there's anything I can leave you with, I hope it's that. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for your investment in me. I so appreciate all your support, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.